Hey everyone, welcome to episode 73 of the Technology for Good show. We are live. It's Friday, the 16th of October. My name is Tom Raftery. I'm an analyst for RedMonk. And with me today as co-host of the show, our normal co-host, Chris Kernahan, is unavailable, but Gregory Chase. Greg has joined us from Pivotal. And Greg, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Really happy to be here. It's always really fun having a chance to be part of the Tech for Good news recap. My name is Greg Chase, and I'm the Director of Communities here at Pivotal, and really looking forward to discussing this week's news.
So, Greg, we know RedMonk is an analyst company. We help other companies, analyze, see the trends in technologies and work with them on that, on strategies and stuff. But, for those who are unfamiliar with Pivotal, who and what are Pivotal?
So Pivotal is a provider of cloud and open source data technologies for some of the world's most successful companies that are looking at deploying innovative applications and really being able to create unique and interesting customer experiences based on data and applications. So we have a number of open source projects that we work with to do this, including Cloud Foundry, Apache Geode, Apache Hawk, and soon to be the open source Greenplum database.
Okay. If I were to try and unpack that a little, if I were a company looking to work with Pivotal, what would be a typical use case of a Pivotal engagement?
So a fairly common case for our customers is to come up with like an idea of we need a better way to work with the mass public with our mobile applications. Maybe we have an amazing sporting event, for example. And so we want to be able to make sure that our mobile applications for our users are really smart. They can take in things like where is the person at the time, what is their connectivity, what do they want to watch, what is their behavior like, so we can use analytics to predict how they want to probably see or do right at that moment. And we want to make sure that the content and the experience they're getting is ultra reliable.
Nice. Okay, super, fantastic. Thank you for that. So we'll head into the stories. And for anyone who's unfamiliar, what we typically do on this show is we start off with a couple of climate-related stories to kind of set a bit of a context around why we want technology to be so good. And then having gotten the bad news out of the way, we head into the good news stories. The Technology for Good side of the show, and we talk about how technology and the various stories are going to try and help us work into a better world. So the first story that I came across that I thought would be of interest today is this one, and it's one of these ones that you see from time to time, and it's based on new science. It came out on the 12th of October, so it's kind of hot off the presses, a couple of days old. And it talks about the Antarctic ice is melting so fast that the stability of the entire continent could be at risk by 2100, scientists have warned. And you've got widespread collapse of Antarctic ice shelves, a lot of terminology there, which is pretty scary, and the difficulty I have with this, there's a couple of issues I have with this. The difficulty I have with this is several. First of all, as I say, the language in it is pretty scary, and on top of that, this is new science. The fact that the language is scary because this is scientists talking, and they're normally not scary. They're normally kind of conservative. They're kind of going, yeah, well, we think that, but no, in this case, they're going, yeah, guys, we're in deep shit. And that's not language you hear from scientists very often. Secondly, the other big issue I have with it is that they talk about 2100 as kind of a time frame. And that sounds very far away. And I think that can lead people to be very complacent. And, we're in 2015. So 2100 is 85 years away. I'm going to be long gone in 2100. There's no politician elected today who will still be in office in 2100. So there's not a single politician who's going to give a rat's ass about this. But this is pretty serious stuff, because it's not going to happen suddenly in 2100. It's going to be, a gradual slope to get there. So there are issues I have the way this is communicated. And I think most people, when they read this, are going to read down to 2100 and go, sod it, that's fucking years away. Why would I care about that?
Well, I mean, what can you do when people can barely think past what their, what is the world their kids are going to get their grandkids or great grandkids? And I don't think people really are understanding yet that really we are at the cusp of a big change. There will be a new plateau of stability, which for us to even guess what that's going to be is hard to really say. Now, that being said, here in the United States, our biggest approach to climate still is to just deny it away. Just through sheer denial, it will not happen. But
Good. Keep that up.
Yeah, it is one of those things where, I mean, I know that a lot of scientists in climate have switched to more alarmist language, because when they tried saying things like, we have a theory, people in the United States say, well, doesn't theory mean that we don't know for sure?
Yeah.
You didn't say it was the law of the universe.
Come back to us when you know for sure, which, no scientist will ever say. Yeah. The other climate related story that I saw was this one. And basically what this one is saying is that the global marine analysis suggests, as you can see from the headline there, the food chain collapse. So it looks like the addition of CO2 to the oceans is increasing the acidity of the ocean, and also the temperature of the ocean is increasing, and that's going to have enormous effects on all kinds of life in the ocean. You can see here, you got a picture here of coral reefs, which have just gone bleached. They're pretty much dead, basically no life left in them. And coral reefs are massive ecosystems in and of themselves. This is coming from a publication in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And they're just basically saying that there's going to be profound consequences for our way of life. Coastal populations that rely on the oceans for fisheries are in deep trouble. A lot of the fish that we rely on today as food sources are just going to collapse. They're going to go away the way cod went away in the North Atlantic back in the 70s and 80s. It's going to happen for almost all of the major species. What we're missing in this analysis is a timeline. There's no actual timeline in it, so I don't know when this is going to happen. It's probably happening right now, but when we're going to see definitive effects of it, I'm not quite sure. But it is peer-reviewed science, and it is saying it's happening. So I don't know what we can do to stop it.
Well, and maybe they were covering acidification of the ocean, but when you add in plastic and in the ocean as well, I mean, my thought is nature will adapt, no doubt. But if we were dependent on Precambrian life as our food source, who knows what's going to be on the other side of the Great Extinction, and then it might include us.
On the other hand, and we've had two bad news stories, and that's one more than we normally go with. On the other hand, we're starting to see a lot of good news, and The story here, we see the commissioner, the new EU climate change commissioner, Commissioner Cañete. His full name is Miguel Arias Cañete. He said that now 149 nations have published their plans to curb climate emissions. There was only 33 who did that before the 2009 Copenhagen Climate Conference. Now, this time, for this year's climate conference, the one that's happening in Paris in November, we have 149 countries who've published their plans to curb carbon emissions, and that's a huge increase. That's massively good news. What he also did say is that while while 149 countries have done it, they haven't quite gone far enough. But it's still a massive improvement on where we were this time 6 years ago when we had the Copenhagen Climate Conference coming up. Sorry, it was 35, not 33, 35 countries, and they covered less than 14% of emissions. Whereas this time, the 149 countries are covering 90% of global emissions. So, it's a huge improvement. And what it says is that countries are starting to take this far more seriously now. And, it leads to a lot of optimism about outcomes from the Paris Climate Conference this year.
Well, and I mean, for example, a lot of developing countries are pointing to China, for example, saying, oh, well, one reason we don't need to pay attention is because China's carbon footprint per GDP output continues to increase. But in fact, China is similarly making significant strides on reducing its total carbon output as it increases its GDP. So much so that it's very conceivable, and there have been opinion pieces running around the last couple of weeks I saw, where people are thinking, even with today's technology level, it's possible for us to reach the total carbon reduction that we need to protect us from going above the 2 degrees Celsius increase.
Yeah, that's the hope. And I mean, we saw late last year, China and the US come to a bilateral agreement, and a significant bilateral agreement in carbon reductions. And that was, massively optimistic. That was a huge step forward. And in fact, it was disagreements between China and the US in 2009 that held up agreement for a long time. So to see China and the US reaching a bilateral agreement a year before the climate conference in Paris was a huge step forward. So I'm quite optimistic about how this year's climate conference will turn out. I think we're in for good stuff. We might not get everything we want to get, but we'll get a hell of a lot. We'll go several steps forward from where we are today. Having said that, I mean, you mentioned developing countries, Greg. I saw this story coming out of India, and it talks to the kinds of small steps that are starting to happen, which, although small, are also significant. We're seeing, and this is from the Guardian, and we're seeing things like small communities in India and farming communities in India leapfrogging, using technology, leapfrogging and getting into smart agriculture. And, agriculture is a significant contributor to carbon emissions. But this story talks about solar-powered irrigation, handheld crop sensors, and climate-smart villages in places like Gujarat, Haryana, Punjab, and other states in India. And there's some great examples there of the way farmers are using technology to increase their output, reduce their costs, and reduce their carbon emissions. They're doing things like they're using, as I said, solar panels, but they're also doing things like they're using sensors to sense the humidity and reduce their irrigation when it's not needed anymore. They're getting rid of the diesel-powered irrigation pumps and reducing them with solar-powered pumps. Obviously, far better for everyone there. So we don't think typically of agriculture, and particularly agriculture in places like India, as being smart, but in fact, it's looking like places like India, the agriculture is becoming a hell of a lot smarter than it is in a lot of the first world countries. They're leapfrogging the technologies that we've been using to surpass us.
It doesn't actually surprise me. If you look at, for example, telecommunications, you know, it's mobile technologies are a far smarter way to lay out a network of communication. And so if you're building infrastructure from the start, why are you not going to use the latest and greatest? And you know, green and smart and resource conservative infrastructure in general is the smartest way to lay things out. And this is part of the reason why China, for example, is able to grow its GDP with a far smaller footprint, carbon footprint than before, is they can take advantage of these new technologies rather than have to replace something that's more or less working but is carbon intensive. So of course you're going to be using the best in newly developing areas. You know, the issue we have in developing countries is we have all of this infrastructure that works pretty good, and we've grown a lot of GDP, and we're very dependent on it. And we would be losing the value that this working infrastructure has by ripping it out and replacing it with something, quote, smarter or more green. And that's a lot harder to swallow.
It is, and you got to. I mean, it's a tough one because you got to look at the total lifetime footprint of any of these things that you're ripping out and replacing. And you know, does it make sense to rip it out and replace it with something that's greener? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but it has to be done on a case-by-case basis. What savings are you getting from ripping out and replacing versus the footprint of actually manufacture of the new whatever? So it's these things are massively complicated and need to be, like I said, done on a case-by-case basis. But it's fantastic to see places like India, and we see it, as you say, in China, but also in Africa as well. A lot of this leapfrogging. So in places like India and Africa, we're starting to see the rise of a lot of microgrids in electricity. So instead of going from the typical European scenario where you've got central generation pushing out to the edges, what you're seeing is a lot of community solar and things like that rising in Africa and India, and the rise of microgrids. And obviously the carbon footprint of these community grids and microgrids is far, far less. And it fills me with a lot of optimism to see these kind of things happening, because it says, as you rightly point out, that people are looking at these and saying that this is the way to go forward. It's actually cheaper and it's greener.
Yes.
And if we move on from there, speaking of solar, see, that was a nice segue. I'm getting good at this. Moving on from there, we've got this story coming out of the US, where we see that solar is about to hit a big energy milestone, because we're getting to a point now where more than 1 million American homes should have solar panels by February 2016. So, and this is happening because, and we've talked about it before, because of what's called the Swanson effect. And the Swanson effect is the fact that the price of solar drops 20% for every doubling of installed capacity. It's like Moore's law for solar. So with a dropping and a continuous dropping, this has been going on for like 30 years, a continuous dropping in price of 20% for every doubling of output of installed capacity, we're seeing the pricing falling and falling and falling. And of course, that becomes a virtuous circle, because as it becomes cheaper, more people take it up. As more people take it up, the installed capacity doubles and the price drops another 20%. And that just keeps on going. And now we're getting to a point where I say where there's 1 million American homes by next February, which will have solar installed. And of course, again, more homes with it installed means price drops even more, means more homes will want to install it. So it's phenomenal to see, and it just keeps on getting better and better.
It's amazing, and I know it's outside of the scope of our news, but there was another study, or I don't know, an opinion piece or a study floating around a few weeks ago, basically saying that today there is actually enough renewable capability to go 100% carbon-free technology in 10 or 20 years. It technologically can be done now. And yes, you do have the issue where most renewable energy is also not necessarily reliable, but there's between, usually the wind is blowing somewhere in the world and the sun is shining somewhere in the world. On top of that, storage has starting to get good enough. But if you add in, the rapid improvement in batteries that are happening thanks to the work with our friends at Tesla, yeah. We really are at that point where energy can be free. I might actually recommend you bump a couple of your the Chattanooga stories up, because this seems to fit where we're segueing into next. But
sure. No, you're right, and you're right as well on storage. That's that's an important add-on for solar, because obviously in most areas the sun doesn't shine 24 hours a day. It only does in the poles at kind of 6 months of the year, but you need storage to back up solar, and the price of storage is dropping. There is no equivalent to the Swanson effect or Moore's law that I know of for storage, but I'm sure it'll come because the price of storage is cratering as well. So that's fantastic to see.
It's a matter of also smartly managing demand. And in this particular study, they were making, the guy did the math, and basically, I should have added one more component. Part of the math of what he did is he actually ran the economic numbers and said, it right now will cost us less to switch to renewables in 10 or 20 years than for us to try and keep this old infrastructure going for longer. Now, part of what he added added up is he said, basically, you need to assume you need 4 times the generation capacity of renewable energy versus your traditional stable sources of energy, and you may even still need a little bit of the traditional energy as a backup to maintain the reliability of the power grid. But all those numbers, because the wind might not be blowing as much as the sun is not shining right now, but with 4 times generation capacity in both wind and solar, you are making up for that demand.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is there's a thing in electricity grids called the capacitance factor, and what that means is, say you build out a solar farm of 100 megawatts. So 100 megawatts is the maximum it can produce on a sunny day. But because it's not fully sunny all the time, say, there are days when it's not sunny, and say there's, 8 to 10 hours a day when it's nighttime, your capacitance factor for that solar farm is probably going to be 30 to 40%. Because, as I say, the sun doesn't shine all the time, particularly at nighttime, etc. So the capacitance factor for renewables is typically less than 50%. However, the capacitance factor for the fossil fuel industry, the gas, the coal plants, etc., is typically in the order of 70 to 80%, and it's that high because you can burn coal any time of day or night, and similarly with gas. The reason it's 70 to 80% and not 90 to 100% is because these plants have to be taken offline from time to time for maintenance and so on. What's interesting, though, is that the energy markets are typically price-driven on the wholesale side. And a lot of people aren't aware of this. The price of electricity can shift orders of magnitude within a 24-hour period. And as the price is shifting, the really cool thing about it is that as the price drops, the fossil fuel generators drop out of the market. So they drop out of the market because they've got set costs. To burn gas, to generate electricity, they have to buy gas. To burn coal, they have to buy coal. The the renewable companies, on the other hand, don't have those same costs. They don't have to buy the sun, they don't have to buy the wind. So in wholesale markets, they are price takers. And as the price drops, they continue to say, okay, give me the money, I don't care, I'm going to stay in the market. Whereas the fossil fuel companies go, okay, price has gone too low for me, I'm out. So as the price of electricity becomes cheaper, the percentage of renewables in the mix actually goes up. So cheaper electricity typically is a higher percentage of renewables in the mix, which is really interesting and totally counterintuitive. And the thing is, as you increase the amount of renewables in your grid, what that means is the capacitance factor for the renewables starts to drop even more. So whereas they were maybe 80%, they're now maybe dropping down to 70% and even lower, because more and more often the renewables will say, no, no, I'll stay in the market, let their fossil fuel companies jump out. So now fossil fuels are becoming less competitive on two fronts. A, on price, because the price of renewables is dropping, and B, on capacitance factor, because their capacitance factor is falling because they're dropping out of the market more often. So fossil fuel companies are becoming less attractive, and they're becoming less attractive on two fronts. It's fantastic. So the more renewables you drop, you put into the system, the less attractive on several fronts the fossil fuel companies become. I should say as well, John Astral has dropped a comment into the tweet stream there saying that there's a cellular network in Mexico. It's a story we covered a couple of months ago. It's on wired.com, and he's put the link in there. And it's a really good story. It talks about how people have set up their own wireless networks using open technologies, and the link is there. It's really good, and if anyone is watching and wants to check it out, they should do so. But we'll move on. So the next story that I thought, and you said to drop in the Chattanooga one now because it's relevant. So we'll switch over to that one. It wasn't in the order, but as you say, it is relevant. So there's
I can never do anything in order.
There's two stories coming out of Tennessee, coming out of Chattanooga. The first may seem to be unrelated, but it does tie in, and bear with me on it. And it's how the Chattanooga utility company, bear with me a second, I need to take a sip of water. So the Chattanooga utility company called EPB, Echo Papa Bravo, EPB, have rolled out a citywide broadband capacity of 10 gigabits. Now, we got to put a bit of backstory on this. Chattanooga were the first US city to roll out gigabit broadband. They rolled out 1 gigabit broadband. It was a couple of years ago, and it was a big deal at the time. And they've been followed by a couple of other cities in the US who have done it since. And then Comcast came in. Always, nice to have a bit of competition. And Comcast rolled out a 2 gigabit broadband in Chattanooga, and suddenly, people had a decent choice. And now the Chattanooga utility company, EPB, have come out and rolled out a 10 gigabit broadband for, okay, this is mostly for companies, it's not for home broadband, because it's going to cost in the order of $300 a month. So very few people would have that in their home, but it's great for companies who want to start a business in Chattanooga. And so there's a happy coincidence in this story, because just yesterday I had a briefing with SNC Electric, and SNC Electric are a company who they are a vendor to utility companies. And they were talking about a case study they did with this particular utility company, EPB in Chattanooga. And they helped this utility company increase the reliability of their grid by 50% by rolling out some of SNC's smart grid technologies. Basically, they turned their electricity grid into a self-healing grid. So anytime there's an outage, the grid detects where the outage occurs and routes around it, a bit like internet technologies. And what was interesting for me was that SNC Electric talked to the utility company. The utility company wanted to do this. They rolled it out, and they achieved. They were aiming for a 40% increase in reliability, and they got in excess of a 50% increase in reliability, and that was fantastic. And now we see that the same utility company was the first utility company to roll out gigabit broadband in the US, and now they've gone to 10 gigabit broadband, for their city. So this is a company, EPB. This is a company they're going all out to make their city be one of the most attractive cities in the country for business. I mean, you have in Chattanooga 10 gigabit broadband for $300 a month. Plus, you have one of the most reliable electricity grids in the country. Because you've got that self-healing smart grid technology built into the grid there, the reliability of the electricity grid has increased 50%, and you've got fantastic broadband there. I mean, I know it's in Tennessee, which isn't exactly Silicon Valley, but Silicon Valley is bloody expensive to be having a business now. And, why wouldn't you go, particularly if you have a tech business where, your location isn't as important as a lot of businesses. So why wouldn't you do a startup in somewhere like Tennessee when you've got fantastic connectivity and fantastic electricity?
And so, okay, wanted to clarify one thing. This is the municipal utility district that's doing all this in Chattanooga, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that's why I wanted to talk about this because I am a huge fan of municipal utility districts. I see what the local ones do here in California versus our lovely three-letter acronyms, electricity and gas provider, and it's just wonderful. And the ability for communities to become not just nicer places to live, but also greener and do this cheaper for the residents just makes a whole lot more sense. And there's a lot of opportunities to do the kind of innovation we've just been talking about. Like, for example, could we do a green-only utility grid? Yes, probably it will be a municipal utility district doing this, and it'll be involving the kinds of smart technology like you were just describing here for this smart grid. That's just one piece of it.
Yeah.
If you add in the ability to automate switching over between different types of green technologies, in many cases, utility districts, not only can they go all green energy, they may all be able to produce a significant amount of their own energy rather than having to buy it on wholesale markets. They may even theoretically become a net energy contributor on a community basis. I've always kind of wondered, could we do this even in my neighborhood here? Could I organize the homeowners association to turn in themselves into a virtual power plant? And if I recall, I think that's where I actually met you many years ago, was in a hackathon that was exploring that exact question, how you would do that.
Yeah. And I mean, as people start to do things like buy electric cars, then it becomes eminently possible. I mean, the Tesla car, for example, has got a battery, depending on which model you buy, of somewhere between 75 kilowatt hours and 90 kilowatt hours. And Tesla want to sell 500,000 of those cars per annum by 2020. Now, let's be conservative and let's say that they lower the capacity of the batteries to 50 kilowatt hours. And let's say they sell not 500,000 cars a year, but let's say they sell 250,000 cars a year. 250,000 cars a year by 50 kilowatt hours is 12.5 gigawatt hours per annum. That's 12 and a half nuclear power plants worth of power.
Wow.
In cars. That's just in cars. So, and Tesla is connected to all the cars that they've sold all the time. They're in constant contact with them. So if they say to the owners, guys, let's do a virtual power plant. You can buy in or not. You want to buy in, we'll take it off your lease or whatever. and we'll do energy arbitrage, and any money we make we'll share with you on a 50-50 or 70-30 or whatever the split is. And suddenly it starts to become interesting. Like I say, you've got 12 and a half nuclear power plants a year at very conservative numbers. This and schemes like it will start to be big players in the energy markets in the future, I think.
So I have a thought on that, but I'm going to save it for a little later because I don't want to destroy your order any more than I already have. But let me just say one thing though is, and I don't know if it was a news or a discussion I was following, but someone had told me that Tesla has basically figured out that the batteries they invented to make their cars possible are in fact even more applicable to home energy use than they are the cars. So I think you're going to see Tesla's home battery becoming a significant and important product on the household level. And what would a network of these in a neighborhood do when you add in all of these rooftop storage and the ability to co-generate your own winds at a neighborhood level?
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest, about that. And the reason I have a little bit of a doubt about that is because if you think that their cars are somewhere between 75 kilowatt hours and 90 kilowatt hours, depending on which car you buy, whereas the Powerwall in-home batteries are somewhere between 7.5 and 10 kilowatt hours, you start to see that there's a big change in scale. There's almost an order of magnitude difference in between the two. I think, sure, I think the Powerwall batteries will have a part to play, but I think the cars will have a bigger part to play. Now, there's a huge price difference between the two, obviously, but Tesla are talking about having their Model 3 on sale in 2017. They've never been great on delivering, to their targets. So let's say they delivered them in 2019. So the Model 3, let's say, comes out in 2019. The price point of that is going to be around, they say, $30,000 to $35,000. That's a big drop in price from the $100,000 for the Model S and the $130,000 for the Model X. So the Model 3 is going to come in around $30,000, and the battery in that will be around, as I say, we don't know, but let's say it's 50 kilowatt hours. Suddenly you've got an extremely affordable battery and a car that can go long distances and can also do vehicle to grid stuff. So it's, we're starting to see the smart home technologies becoming a lot smarter. And we're starting to see the cars and the vehicle to grid stuff become a lot smarter as well. And I think we'll get on to the transportation side of things shortly, because there's a lot of stories around transportation this week. But there's a couple of stories around smart home that I wanted to touch on as well.
Right.
And this one I thought was an interesting one, because it is kind of IoT and smart home stuff. And it's this company called August. Excuse me. And August have... They started out with just this smart lock thing that you put on your door. And basically, you could open your door remotely, or you could give virtual keys to people, so you no longer needed to, hide your keys under a stone or whatever. You could, and you could set times that people had access and things like that, and get notified when people came in. But they've broadened out from that now. And they don't just have the virtual lock. They have now launched on top of that a doorbell camera and keypads and other devices as well. And they all kind of work together, and they're all remotely accessible. And it starts to make a lot of sense for your home to have these kinds of things because, as of yet, very few people have smart locks on their doors, but it's going to become increasingly the way that you let yourself into your home. You no longer fumble for keys. You no longer have a keychain with about 40 keys hanging off it. You just have your phone. And as you approach the door, the lock through Bluetooth sees you coming and just opens the door for you. And you grant people access to enter or not based on their phones. And similarly, they approach the door unlocks, they let themselves in or not. And while you're away from home, as soon as you walk out the door locks itself. If you have kids and they have phones, your kids, you know, arrive home from school, the door unlocks, lets the kids in, you get a notification no matter where you are, your kids have arrived home. If you have people leaving deliveries, you can choose to let them in or not, and so on. You get notified on your phone. And if you have the doorbell camera that they're after launching, what happens is someone approaches your door, you get a notification, you look at your phone, you see who's at the door, you can talk to them, they can talk to you. You know, you get video streamed from your front door, no matter where you are, as long as you've got an internet connection. So you start talking to people who are at your front door and you decide to let them in or not. It's you know, it's a huge change in how we're interacting, and it's a further proof that everything is becoming smart, and the intelligence going to the edge of the system is bringing advances that, you know, were unheard of or unimaginable 4 years ago, 3 years ago.
They were imaginable. The only thing we're still missing is the flying cars from the Jetsons.
They're coming too. They're coming too. But yeah, that's a little further out, and but they're coming too. I mean, I've seen flying cars talked about and several links to it, but I'm not sure how much I'd want a flying car, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they'd want to be pretty autonomous. I'd want to sit in the car and say, I want to go there, take me there, and just sit back. I don't want to be flying, because if I'm flying, and then I need to get a pilot's license, which is complicated and requires a lot of training and stuff like that. I don't want all that. I don't want that hassle. I don't want the time invested. I just want to be able to sit in the car and go, take me here. And whether it goes on road or on air, that's the car's decision. And whatever's fastest. And, you know, if all the cars are connected, then you know, they start to do swarming, they start to have intelligence and know where each one is in space, so that they know not to crash into each other. And I just sit there and I'm reading my book or working my laptop or whatever. And I get in and I can take a nap if I want.
I think you just changed the order of your stories again.
Dude, you're not helping. Okay.
You segued yourself this time, so.
We go back to IoT, because that's where we were until you got me off track, and I went off in tangents and stuff. It's terrible. It's terrible. Oh man. Pebble Time smartwatch. This is just a by-the-by story. They've now added voice dictation. There should be a picture here, but for some reason it's not showing up. Anyway, they're now letting third-party developers add voice dictation to apps for their watches, and that's pretty cool. And the big advantage there, I suspect, is going to be for accessibility issues, for people who are, you know, who have visual problems, who are challenged that way. It's going to be massive for them, because the Pebble smartwatches are pretty smart and can do a lot of stuff, but a lot of their functionality is hidden from people who are visually challenged. So, and you know, Apple Watches can do a lot of this stuff already. So this is kind of them playing catch up. But I think it's going to be, you know, fascinating for people, as I say, who have visual problems. But more interesting for people who are into video and that kind of stuff. That was a stretched segue there, but we'll go with it. Is Skype, and Skype now making it easy, apparently, for people to chat with anyone who doesn't have a Skype account, who doesn't have Skype downloaded. Most people have Skype downloaded, but now you can, and you see it in the video here. I'll run the video. So there's a new button here, the new button, it just says NEW. And when you click that, you get a link, and that link can then be pasted into, in this case, a Facebook Messenger, or it can be sent by email to people. And that way,
don't use your Facebook video. Click this link.
There you go. You see, so you no longer need to download Skype. You no longer need to have the application. You no longer need to have a Skype account. You can send this to anyone, anywhere, and as long as they can click on the link, they can join an IM chat on Skype or a video chat on Skype. And this is basically Skype opening up their system to people who don't have accounts. So it becomes a bit like Google Hangouts, or Google Hangouts work with just a browser. Or who else is doing something like this?
Well, at that level,
Firefox have it as well. So in Firefox, you can send people a link as well, and as long as they have a browser capable of opening the link, you can video chat with people using Firefox as well, the same kind of way.
Still doing only one-to-one, or is it able to do a group?
I think you can do group. I do in Firefox as well. So there's a couple of people doing it now. It speaks to more the democratization of group video chat, and that's phenomenal, and it's really impressive. And I mean, we all know that video is a far more immersive means of communication than just text. It's far more emotive. It's far clearer as well, because it's very easy in text-based communications to misunderstand people, whereas you get far more of the expression in people's tone of voice and on their faces when you have them in video.
And I look forward to that, because, for example, group video chat is an important part of how the open source communities that I work with work together. So we've been looking at things like Google Hangout is what Cloud Foundry After Dark community meeting uses for Apache Geode and Apache Hawk. We ended up choosing Adobe Connect. That gives that same experience where we say, boom, here's a link, come join us in the video collaborative session. So I think definitely we need to take a look at this new Skype technology for managing virtual communities like this.
Do, and take a look at the Firefox one as well. It's a nice one, and let me know how you get on with both, because I'd be interested to hear back how that goes for you guys.
Sure.
The Firefox one is good as well. I'm not sure, they don't have the back end that Skype has, so it might not work out as well. But I'd be interested to see or to hear back. We're going to move on to transportation, because there's a couple of transportation stories that popped up this week. It's funny how these things happen in kind of groups. The first one is the big one. I mean, this has been all over the news. It was expected. It was announced ahead of time, and it happened this week. Tesla launched their autopilot update for their Tesla Model S and Model X cars. And this is for all Tesla cars that were manufactured after, I think it's October 2014, because they have all the sensors to allow this to happen. It's been rolled out in the US first, and it's going to gradually roll out across Europe and Asia afterwards. What it is with this update, and it's an over-the-air update, the same kind of update you get for your phone. Tesla are the only company that are doing this kind of thing, the over-the-air updates for the cars. With this update, the cars now get added functionality. They can drive autonomously. You can literally sit into your Tesla, tell it where you want it to go, and it starts driving. Tesla themselves urge caution and say, look, you're still liable. We're not going to assume liability. You guys are still liable, so you got to be ready to grab control of the car. And there are plenty of videos and plenty of reviews of this since it was rolled out midweek. You can see videos of these Tesla cars driving down city streets and autonomously changing lanes, overtaking. And they didn't just build in the autonomous capabilities into the car, they also built in self-parking. So you can get to your destination, find a parking spot, and the car will park itself, parallel park itself, no problem. And again, all of this, plenty of videos online of it, and people in the videos absolutely blown away by how well it works, both on highways and city driving. And you see the videos, and people are just sitting there with their hands in the air like this as the car drives down the highway or drives down a city street, pulls up, stops behind other cars at traffic lights, this kind of thing, overtakes cars by itself. And, you know, they're sitting there with their hands like this going, this is awesome. You know, it's a complete sea change in how driving is going to be done. Now, it's very far away from having robot cars yet. It's very far away from you know, calling your car like Kit in Knight Rider and saying, Kit, meet me at the front door in 2 minutes. And, you know, car pulls itself around to the front door, you jump in and says, okay, take me to wherever. It's not there yet, but it's a stepping stone along the way. And that's where we're going to get to. And I honestly think, similar to the virtual power plant thing I was talking about earlier as a business model for Tesla, I honestly think Tesla are going to take on the likes of Uber with this kind of thing as well. Because it'll be the case that when you have your Model 3, you'll have your Model 3 and you'll be paying, you know, $300 a month on lease for it, or $500 a month, or whatever your agreement is. And you will say, you know, okay, I'm at my place of work. I don't need my car now until 5 o'clock this afternoon. So it's available for hire, and have it back here at 5 o'clock with a half full battery so that I can get home. And in that intervening 8 hours, the car will just disappear, drive off somewhere else and start ferrying people around. And like Uber, you know, the car will know who it's picking up. There'll be credit card transactions. There'll be ratings of passengers. Any damage to the car will be noted, and the people responsible for it, liable for it. And then at 5 o'clock, you'll arrive out at your parking space where you left the car will be there, or the car will appear at the door, or you know, because you've got full GPS, you'll know where the car is. You can go to the car can come to you. You sit into the car, it brings you home, and then it plugs in and charges when and if the grid thinks it's a good idea for it to charge.
I think your next story is a really great example of how the Tesla is enabling this.
Yeah. Absolutely. So this is going to happen, and it'll be a rev share in the same way that the virtual power plant will be a rev share. It'll come off your lease. So suddenly your monthly leasing price drops as a result. This is going to happen. This is absolutely going to happen. And very few people are aware that this is going to happen. But, and I don't have any shares in any company. I've none. But if I were to be investing in companies right now, I'd be putting money in Tesla, because they haven't released the business plan for the revenue share on the shared cars or the virtual power plants. And when they do, their price is just going to go up like that. So if I had money to be putting into companies, I'd be buying shares in Tesla right now.
So here's my counter on this. This is why I was not thinking that Teslas would be a virtual power plant in the home, because if the scenario comes true that what you just said, why would I even invest the money in buying a Tesla? Why don't I just rent a Tesla to go home and come back? You know, I can be the consumer of the service rather than buying the capital or buying the lease of the thing. Now, granted, at some point it's just a financial transaction at that point, but you know, there's no reason why the car can't be working all night other than it loses its battery. When I'm sleeping, as in when I'm working. I really do not need to own it.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
And I've seen more than a little speculation that the Model S really has been designed as a virtual taxi, not as a SUV for people to own. You know, don't. I thought Google was going to be the one owning the municipal core of robot cars, but Tesla may be setting themselves up to be that provider, or at least providing the equipment, and then let somebody like Uber run it.
Yeah, no argument there. I think you're right. I think there will always be a percentage of people who want to own their own cars, and maybe you make a profit off it. Hey, maybe you don't lease, maybe you buy outright. So you can make a profit straight away, or maybe you make enough off the share that the lease is covered. It's one of these things that we don't know which way it's going to go, but it's going to happen. I've no doubt it's going to happen, because the amount of people who can afford cars or want to own cars is dropping. There will always be a percentage of people who do, but I suspect what will happen on that front is that the cost of insurance will change how people decide to do their ownership. So I think you can either choose to be somebody who is ferried around by an intelligent car, or you can be a person who owns a car and chooses to drive. And there will be vastly different. There'll be vastly different insurance rates depending on which one of those two you want to be.
I think it's going to be a short amount of time before there will be roads and there will be sections of the city where human-powered cars are not allowed, because already Google has proven that self-driving cars are more reliable. If you add in Tesla and Tesla at things at scale, I think we're going to start seeing things like self-driving car lanes on the freeways, and urban corridors will only be robot-powered self-driving cars because A, they don't want the hazard of humans driving, but secondarily, you can actually work these as a swarm and more optimally use the space so that there's less traffic and you really need less vehicles around.
Not only that, but if you're working them as a swarm, you can then gain from fuel efficiency, because if they're tailgating is the wrong word, but I've forgotten what the correct word is. If they're all, going together in a convoy, the fuel efficiency vastly increases.
Yeah, there you go. You just solved the long distance transport, not just the urban corridor one.
There you go.
I honestly think we're going to, the younger generation really does not want to own a car.
No.
And there's a story that I didn't see in your mix that went out about this. And, we have a rating debate in my neighborhood, in fact, where some people want our downtown street to have more lanes for cars, but all the young people want to have the sidewalks increased so they can walk around and not be run over by cars.
Yeah. Or have bike lanes.
Yep.
So, speaking of car lanes, ooh, we got another segue. Thank you for that. And Tesla are really clever in this, because they're connected to their cars all the time. They're using their cars or their customers' cars as ways of mapping not just the roads, but all the lanes in the roads. So if you look at this image on the left, the image on the left is the roads mapped, but the image on the right is all the lanes in all the roads mapped. So you have multiple yellow lines per road, each yellow line corresponding to an individual lane on that road. And of course, that's hugely important when you're doing autonomous driving, because the car doesn't just need to know the road, it needs to know all the lanes in the roads. So what Tesla is doing is it's taking the GPS information, anonymizing it from all the road trips of all the owners of Tesla cars, and it's overlaying that GPS information onto the roads, and it's getting the lane information for every road that every Tesla has driven on. So it's crowdsourcing the information in a very, very clever way, I gotta say.
Clever is the word for this, because I remember when you were watching the Google mapping car coming around the neighborhood. Tesla already has the scale to do this and much more efficiently and inexpensively. And I think what you're seeing here is not the final nail, but the beginning of the end of human-powered cars.
Yeah, I think so. It's tremendous. I love it. I absolutely love it. And if we move on from there, this is a story we actually covered last week, but I wanted to bring it up again in case anyone didn't see it last week. But I think it's hugely important, and I think it's worth a re-mention. Tesla said this week, when they launched the autonomous driving, they said, look, you guys, even though you're in our cars and our cars are driving, you guys are still liable. You got to keep your hands ready to jump back on the wheel again, and so on. But Volvo have said, and they've come out directly and said, we're going to be launching our self-driving autonomous cars in 2019, and we'll take full responsibility for any crashes that our cars are involved in. So Volvo have said, no, we will assume full liability. It'll be our fault if any of our cars are responsible for a crash, not the driver's fault, because the driver won't be driving. And that's a huge change. And I think Tesla are right, and I think Volvo are right. They're both right. Tesla are right because Tesla are saying, look, we're starting out on this journey. Pardon the pun. We're starting out on this journey. Right now, you guys need to be responsible because we're starting out and we haven't maybe got all the tech right, and there are situations which we might not have accounted for. So you need to be aware, you need to be watching the road at all times, you need to be ready to grab the wheel, and you are responsible.
So, I'd rather Volvo actually take responsibility for their smoggy cars. That to me would be a little more fair. But
that's Volkswagen.
Volkswagen, sorry. Oh, you're right. Oh, well, sorry, Volvo. Sorry, Volvo. All right, but actually, here's the funny part. So again, Google already showed that self-driving cars are more reliable than humans.
Yes.
And in Google cars, there's been only 3 accidents, and all 3 were caused by the humans involved, not the self-driving car. So one could argue with those kinds of stats, you don't even need to insure a self-driving car, or at least the insurance rates are going to be a heck of a lot cheaper than a human-powered one.
There, I'm not sure when that article that you're referring to was published, but the more recent statistics I've seen for Google cars being involved in accidents was like 11 or 12 accidents. But yes, they were all caused by other people, not by the Google cars, and they have all the data to support that claim. And most of them were rear-ended. The interesting thing, the big difference between the Google autonomous cars and the Tesla autonomous cars is the Google autonomous cars use LiDAR, which is a form of radar, which sits in a kind of a thing on top of the car and does massive amounts of data samples every second. The Tesla ones don't do that. They're just using cameras and sensors all around the car. They're not using the LiDAR, which means they don't have as good a picture of what's happening all around them as the Google cars do. So it's very different technology, and I can understand why Tesla are saying, for now, we want to hold off on being responsible.
Google's car is built for adapting to a world with human drivers, and Tesla's car will adapt very well to a world that doesn't have any human-powered cars involved.
Yeah, I think the Google car is the moonshot, and I think the Tesla car is the steps along the way. The Yuri Gagarins to getting us to the moon, the Sputniks,
or the Google is the pioneers and Tesla is the settlers.
Yeah. Nice, very nice, very nice. Yeah, good.
Does that segue to anything, by the way?
No, not really. But
here we are, dinosaurs. That could work.
So Toyota have said they want gas cars, internal combustion engine cars, to go the way of dinosaurs, and that's fair enough. They have their own view on it. They think that fuel cells are the way forward, not electric cars. But either way, they want internal combustion engine cars to go away, and that's good to hear. Honda are bringing out there's the Honda Super Cub, it's called. I never came across that term before, Honda Super Cub. I don't know if that's a US term for the bike. In Ireland, when I grew up, this bike was called the Honda 50, and it was very common. Little 50cc Honda motorbike, but they're bringing out an electric version of it. And one of the reasons that's important is this was a hugely influential vehicle, the Honda 50, the Honda Super Cub. The marketing behind it has become a case study in marketing. And it is the most sold vehicle in the world. Something like 87 million of these devices have been sold down through the years. So now the fact that they're bringing out an electric version of it is hugely important. And staying with transportation, the X Prize founder Peter Diamandis is bringing the Hyperloop, which is a form of transportation which was dreamed up by Elon Musk, to the United Arab Emirates by 2020. And basically, the Hyperloop is run in a vacuum using magnets and goes extremely fast. If I remember correctly, they were talking about was it a 30-minute journey from Los Angeles to San Francisco? That makes sense. Something like that anyway, massively, massively fast. So it hasn't happened in the US yet. There are trials happening in Texas and places, but now they're talking about by 2020 having one in the United Arab Emirates. So that's pretty cool and one to watch out for. And the last thing in the kind of transportation is Boeing have brought out this microlattice, it's called. It's a metallic structure which is as strong as metal, but you can see this is a picture of the microlattice resting on top of a dandelion head. So it's extremely light. And one of the reasons Boeing are interested in it is because, Boeing are an aircraft manufacturer, and having light, strong metals is hugely important, both in terms of fuel efficiency for aircraft, but also in terms of electrifying the aviation fleet. We saw Airbus brought out their E-Fan, which was their electric plane. They brought out the prototype this year, and they flew it across the English Channel in 39 minutes earlier this summer. And it was the first, it was either the first or second, depending on who you believe, electric plane to cross the English Channel. Both happened on the same day. But Airbus are turning this into a product in 2017. They'll have 2- and 4-seater versions of it, fully electric planes. Boeing are obviously looking at this, and they're saying, well, if we can reduce the weight of our vehicles, then it's going to be far easier to run them off batteries. So, and something like this will be hugely important, I suspect, in making these devices, making planes which can run off, electric power as opposed to burning jet fuel.
I'm excited to see what this material and this approach is going to do just in general. I mean, I see this being, as transformational as carbon fiber. The applications are probably just beginning. I'm sure there's a lot of material scientists all over the place who are looking at this going, I can make a really interesting smartphone out of this, or a really interesting car, or a really interesting bike, or a really interesting, who knows what the heck.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll be having hyperloops to Mars with this material and this. So
absolutely. I'm going to rush through the last couple of stories and skip one or two of them. I think that there's a couple of interesting ones that are left. We're over time, so that's why I'm doing a bit of a rush. So ResearchKit is something that Apple brought out. It was either earlier this year or late last year. I think it was late last year, in fact. And it's an open source platform for researchers to put applications, and people can sign up for those applications and take part in research experiments. And they're around all kinds of things. The first ones that they brought out were around Parkinson's and heart disease and a couple of other things like that. And now the latest ones are around autism, epilepsy, and melanoma. And this isn't something that Apple are doing themselves. What they did was they created the framework for these medical studies. And now we see that the epilepsy study is being done by Johns Hopkins, melanoma by Oracle Health and Science University, and autism by Duke University. So these are researchers who are putting out applications that people can sign up for and take part in these studies. I remember at the time, the Parkinson's one, that was one of the first applications. It was first 5 applications that was launched. I remember one of the researchers who created that application saying that the largest Parkinson's study ever undertaken before had something like 1,500 participants. And since they launched the Parkinson's the Parkinson's app on ResearchKit, they had something like 7,500 people sign up for it in 6 hours. And there's a huge difference between having an application being completely objective in terms of measuring people's gait and measuring people's tremor based on the accelerometers in the phones. That's completely objective and completely uniform versus, and doing it all the time, versus doctors doing it separately in their own clinics, maybe once a month or maybe once every 3 months. So the results of the doctors doing it in their clinics once every month, and each doctor having their own subjective opinions versus, you know, devices doing it based on accelerometers and all the same accelerometers and doing it, you know, for 7,500 or 10,000 or 20,000 subjects as opposed to 1,500 subjective studies. You know, the data quality is going to be orders of magnitude better. And now it's not just for those kind of things, but it's also for melanoma, it's for the autism, and what this is going to do. This is revolutionary, and I've written about this a couple of times. This is revolutionary for what it's going to do for medical research. And not alone did Apple launch it, and there was no good reason for them to do so. Not only did they launch it, but they've open sourced it.
Which I think is wonderful.
It's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. I don't know if anyone has taken it to Android yet, but like I say, it's open source, so they could do if they wanted to. You know, it's, I mean, wow. It really, really blows me away. And the fact that there are more and more things, more and more diseases being researched using this is fantastic. It's really, really great. The two more stories I wanted to touch on. As I say, we're running out of time, so I'm going to skip through them quickly. The first one is interesting, I think, because it's a medical breakthrough in spinal cord injuries, but the breakthrough was made by a computer program, basically the likes of a Watson. This was a computer program which trawled through previous studies and data and came across something that hadn't been found by people before. So this is going to happen more and more often, where people throw data into programs, the programs sift through the data and find patterns in there that evaded being found before by people. So, and machines can look through far more data than people can. So this is just going to keep on happening more and more often. It's fantastic to see.
And this is the kinds of applications that, for example, the open source solutions we have, such as Apache Hawk running on Hadoop, are enabling people to build.
Yeah, no, it's tremendous. It's really, really great. It's a fantastic example of how big data and analytics coming together can make enormous differences to the world we're living in. And the last story, completely different, no possible segue coming out of this one, but it's a great story. And it's the fact that for the first time, computer science is now the top study for women at Stanford University. I understand Stanford is the kind of place where people go to do computer science, so it's kind of self-selecting. It's not. There's a bit of a bias there in the population we're selecting to look at, but still, it's the first time it's happened that computer science has been the top major for women enrolling in Stanford, and hopefully it speaks to a pattern of more women getting involved in computer science, because you know it's been male dominated for far too long, as have a lot of the sciences. So
I would agree. As somebody in the computer science and software industry, I will tell you two interesting things. So first of all, the startup culture is still a little bit too male-centric, and hopefully with more graduates and more top people that can start companies coming along, that will change. But another interesting fact is As I understand it, our data science team here at Pivotal is actually more women than men, and we have some absolutely amazing
Wow.
female data scientists. So, and I've seen other figures that say that at least the subfield of data science tends to have a very high ratio of women to men compared to, say, good old-fashioned business data programming.
Wow, that's fascinating. I had no idea. That's it. That's any idea why? Probably
Uh,
not. These
it
things are very
could
complicated.
I've noticed that in areas of newer technology tends to have more women, a higher percentage of women than some older technologies. So maybe it's just a matter of when you're building new teams, you're going to be bringing in, who's available in the market today. And as we saw, Stanford is now minting more women than men in computer science.
Cool. Cool. Okay, that's awesome. That's the last one for today. We ran a little over time, but it was all good stuff. Thank you everyone for your time and attention.
My
We'll-
self-driving Tesla is about to pick me up, so
Excellent, excellent. All right, everyone. We'll see you all again, same time, same channel next week, and have a good weekend, have a good week, and enjoy your sustainable life.